Keep it going for Jane Steckbeck.
"10 years ago, I was done with sex. Done. I was standing in my kitchen one morning, and this thought came to me. I could go without sex for the rest of my life, and I'd be just fine. And the next thought, wow, Jane, that is incredibly fucked up. I had been withdrawing from my husband of over 17 years. I was avoiding hugging, kissing, cuddling, and whenever he tried to initiate sex, I pushed him away. I seemed to have a lot of difficulty giving him pleasure with my hands. I just didn't seem to know what to do. And it wasn't that he hadn't shown me. He was very patient. He had shown me many times how he liked to be touched. All I could seem to do was up and down, up and down, up and down. I knew there was more to it, and I felt like such a loser. We played out the same sorry script, too many mornings to count. We would wake up side by side, and in the soft morning light, he would begin to stroke me gently on my back, my arms, and then reaching over to this tender spot on my hip bone. But as soon as he started touching me, I contracted inside. And this voice would say, just go the fuck away. I never said those words, but my body more than effectively conveyed their meaning. In the early years of our marriage, my husband was sweetly persistent, and he would continue gently stroking, and eventually I'd roll over and we'd make love. And my behavior puzzled me, because once the lovemaking started, I enjoyed the pleasure of our connection. I got into it. I had orgasms. But over time, my resistance increased. And over time, my husband got out of bed feeling sad, frustrated, and rejected. Even worse was when he would try to talk to me about what was going on between us. And I would belittle his need. And I would tell him, hey, look, if you're horny, you got one of these, just go whack off. I could feel this distance growing between us, and I felt scared. I just didn't know what to do. And then one day, my husband got invited to attend a workshop on love, intimacy, and sexuality. And when he came home from that workshop, his face was glowing. And he took me by the hands and he looked me in the eyes and he said, I want you to come and do this workshop with me. I think it would be good for our marriage. It was the lifeline I needed. And also because I had no idea what the hell I was getting into, I said yes. When we arrived at the workshop site in Northern California, oh my God, it was such a California scene. I look out the window of the car, and there are all these people hugging. And I turned to my husband and I said, I am so not fucking hugging strangers. And he said, it's okay, you don't have to hug anybody. I said, okay. Sure enough, as soon as this workshop started, the facilitators invited us to circulate and hug our fellow workshop participants. I'm not fucking hugging anybody. Instead, I bravely stuck my hand out and I walked around the room shaking hands with people. I got some bemused looks, but you know what did and didn't happen? What did happen is that people shook my hand and welcomed me. What did not happen is nobody did this and tried to come in and hug me. And in that space of this being respected and this being respected, this place in my heart opened up. And I stepped back and I watched these people hugging. I thought, it's not so bad. And then this little pipsqueak of a voice inside of me spoke up, and she said, oh, I want this. I want this. And by the next morning, I was freely getting and giving hugs, and I felt like a part of me was coming back to life. Later that day, the facilitators introduced a remarkable exercise. And in this exercise, they explained to us that at times in our lives, we receive hurts at the hands of members of the opposite sex. And this exercise would give us a chance to talk to a member of the opposite sex and talk about a way where we had been hurt in the past. And the listener was just going to offer compassionate listening, not make any comments back. My husband asked if I would be his partner. I said, sure. I thought he was going to talk about his mother. I never saw this coming. We sat down together, and he took me by the hands. And he said, I want to try to do this exercise a little bit differently, and I want to see if you can go with me. Can you try to keep an open mind and not be defensive? Okay. He continued, I'm going to talk about the person who hurt me generically. I'm going to refer to her as my wife. Can you listen? I said I would try. He began. I love my wife, and I want to be connected to her. And at times my wife is remote, and she won't let me hug her or cuddle with her or make love to her. My wife doesn't seem to understand that for me, making love has more of a spiritual connection, and it's a way I connect to her deeply. I miss my wife, and I want that connection. By this time, tears were streaming down both of our faces. He continued, but what hurts the most is when I try to talk to my wife about my needs, she belittles me, and she tells me to just go whack off. And for the first time in 17 years, I heard my husband's pain. I don't know if it was the workshop setting, the raw vulnerability he showed, or that unique approach he took. But whatever it was, I heard him. And I understood for the first time that sex was not about him using my body to get off. That sex was about connectivity and spirit and a depth before that I hadn't been able to understand. And I understood that I wanted that too. And I also understood that by telling him to just go whack off, I was being extremely hurtful. I had started attending workshops in order to heal my marriage, and I continued in order to start working on myself. At our next workshop, a year or so later, we entered into another amazing exercise. In this exercise, the facilitators asked us to form groups of 4, 2 men and 2 women. They explained that men and women really don't get to know each other on a deeper, more authentic level, that we really often resort to cultural constructs about men and women. In this exercise, we were going to share with our partners, women were going to talk about what is it like to be in a woman's body, to have breasts, to have the capacity to give birth, to have a vagina. Men were going to talk about what is a man? What's the experience of being a man? What's it like to have a penis? In the second part of the exercise, they said that we were going to take turns looking at one another's genitalia and talking about it. Okay, I see the looks. I see where your minds are going. Let me set the record straight. This was not some cheap grown-up version of you show me yours, I'll show you mine. The atmosphere in that room was exceptionally reverential, respectful, and vulnerable. And it seemed like a great opportunity to really connect with men and women. Sounds great, right? I couldn't do it. I could not do this exercise. And when they first introduced it, I turned to my female partner and I started being scornful. I said, I don't want to sit around and talk with some guys about their dicks. I know what a dick is. God, I know what a dick does. What do I have to do? Talk about a dick. And then a few minutes later, I was cracking dick jokes. This was not my finest hour. When the exercise started, though, we walked into the room where these men were laying nude. I told you it was a California thing. And everybody, you could see everything. Their penises were out. Nobody had an erection. But the energy shifted for me. And I felt like I wasn't in my body anymore. I felt like I was floating above the room. At one point, I actually stopped and I looked down to see that I was still there. And when I looked down, I said, something's really wrong. And I excused myself. I stepped out of the room, which you're totally permitted to do. 3 hours later, in a large group processing session, I was hit with a flashback of stunning clarity. And in that flashback, I was 12 years old. I was walking from my yard to a neighbor's house to ask an older neighbor boy for a motorcycle ride, something I had done many times before. This time when I got to his house, he was not in the garage, but he heard me and he called me into the house. I walked down a hallway following his voice. I followed his voice into a bedroom. He was laying with his pants down. He was laying with his penis out, and he was masturbating. He called me over to him, and when I got over to him, he grabbed my hand and he put it on his penis, up and down, up and down, up and down. And when he was finished, he handed me $1 and told me not to tell anyone. It was our little secret. And when that flashback hit me, I understood 3 things. I understood that seeing those men with their penises out, though there was no erection, that it triggered the trauma of that experience. And I understood that that floating sensation I had was what we call dissociation. It's how we survive trauma. And I understood that I was going to have to go back and repeat that workshop so I could get rid of that trauma. Just over a year later, I in fact went back to that same workshop. And this time when I went in, I talked to about 5 different people And I told them what had happened. And I said, will you support me? And they all said, of course. So when the exercise started, I had a team of supporters, my female partner and a group of assistants and a facilitator, all surrounded me. And this time, when I got to the men laying down, I didn't leave my body. But I got about a foot away and I froze. And I started shaking and trembling and crying. And a few seconds later, I lost control of my legs and I dropped to my knees. And at the foot of this man, I sobbed. And someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, Jane, you don't have to do this. And I turned and I said, yes, I do have to do this. I have to get rid of this trauma. And in that safe space, surrounded by all those people holding me, I sobbed out all the pain, all the betrayal, all the sadness, and it felt like I was returning back to myself. And bless that man that I was partnered with. I mean, how many men in the room can imagine some woman crying at his feet, not wanting to run the hell out the door? This man held space for me. And when my tears subsided, he started talking to me about what it was like to be a man, what it was like to be in his body. And after a while, we were connected in deep eye contact. And then I saw this glint in his eye, and he got playful. And he picked up his penis. And he starts struggling around talking about Mr. Happy, and then he's stretching his scrotum, and I busted out laughing. And in this laughter, with tears still streaming down my face, I felt this lifetime of trauma lift and go. But the best part is when I went home. And I asked my husband, will you please show me one more time how you like to be touched? Will you risk that for me one more time? And he did. And through adult eyes, not the traumatized eyes of a 12-year-old, I could finally see how he liked to be touched. It wasn't this. It was this beautiful symphony of varied and fluid movement. And I watched him, awestruck, joyful, and then I took over. And I took my husband to climax. And afterwards, we lay curled up together on our sides. And I heard that voice again, you know, that little pipsqueak. I want that. Only this time, she said peacefully, yes, this.